Welcome to the Treasures of the Holy Land, Ancient Art from the Israel Museum. I'm Philippe de Montebello, Director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This is the first American exhibition to survey the archaeological collections of the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. The Holy Land's somber and joyous history is seen here in artifacts from the dawn of human settlement through the 7th century AD. That is over 10,000 years. The Holy Land, bounded by sea on the west and desert in the east, linked the civilizations of the ancient Near East. Its history can be read in the diverse artistic influences that modified a very strong native style. The appearance of Egyptian, Assyrian, Persian, Greek, Roman, and Byzantine elements gives evidence of the forces that shaped this historic land and its culture. The ancient inhabitants speak through their works of art. Those objects, often small in size, but always endowed with great spirit, embody the spiritual biography of a people whose philosophy became the Old and New Testaments, the Judeo-Christian foundation of Western civilization. This collection marks a break in time to the Chalcolithic period, about 4500 to 3100 BC, during which the fledgling metal technology gradually replaced the old techniques of working in stone. Most of these small metal objects were found in the Judean desert in a dry riverbed near the Dead Sea. Their quality is unparalleled for that time, and they've revolutionized our knowledge of the ancient people of this area. Unlike much later art, it's unique to the region and marks a high point in the indigenous art of the Holy Land. The casting was a version of the lost wax process in which you can make a wax model, cover it with clay, then pour in copper, melting the wax and replacing it. When you remove the clay, you have the finished product. To produce castings so solidly, so even and free of air bubbles requires complex and incredibly sophisticated technology. Look particularly at the scepter head adorned with ibex horns, or at the mace head with two different blades protruding from it. One rather like an adze, the other resembling a sickle, and the crown with its elaborate ornamentation. These vase-shaped shining objects in the foreground are mace heads. These extraordinary objects were probably buried for safekeeping sometime in the very late 4th millennium BC. This clever anthropomorphic vase found in Jericho is a unique masterpiece of Canaanite or Bronze Age ceramic art. The white-filled punctures are ingeniously used here to represent the hair and beard. This fish-shaped vessel is equally appealing, with its plump body, open mouth with curving corners and round eyes. This magnificent lion is made of the black stone known as basalt. The form of the beast has been sculpted in relief, from great haunch to the curling tail. Textured mane and ears lying back on the head. Looking at the other side, you'll find it's unfinished. That's because it was laid into the side of a doorway to a temple, an impressive guardian to all who entered. This small, block-shaped lion is similar to the large one we looked at a few moments ago. It is far from refined, but the creature has a great deal of power. He seems caught in the surrounding matrix, and the force of his mighty roar seems an attempt to burst forth from the rock which binds him. And it's part of this arrangement of markers or stelae that were made during the Bronze Age, around 1500 to 1200 BC. At the left end of the semicircle is a small seated figure of a man with a shaven head. He was probably a priest, and on his breast he wears an inverted moon-shaped pendant thought to symbolize the moon god Shin. At the center of the group, one stele is inscribed with two hands raised in adoration towards a similar disc, probably another image of the moon. We've installed this group of stone markers essentially as they were found in a temple at the site of Hatzor in northern Israel.
The late Bronze Age, that's 1550 to 1200 BC, was marked by Egypt's growing cultural influence on the region. And that influence is clearly seen in this large anthropoid sarcophagus built up from a continuous pottery coil, and two masks from similar sarcophagi which came from the southern part of Israel, close to Egypt. The mask on the far right shows clear Egyptian influence: the eyebrows, the cosmetic lines on the eyes, and the stylized lotus flowers hanging down over the forehead.
But Egyptian influence was felt in every sphere of Canaanite art.
We now leave the Bronze Age and move into the Iron Age, which corresponds to the Israelite period, the time when, after 1200 BC, the Israelite tribes settled in the Holy Land. These four fragments are the only surviving portion of a balustrade from a Judean palace which existed a few miles south of Jerusalem, not far from Bethlehem. This architectural feature was a well-known motif of the period, but this is the only full-scale one that has actually been found. It gives us just a hint of the kind of royal buildings that must have existed before the destruction of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem in 586 BC. The three items in this case are all from Megiddo, one of Solomon's great royal cities, where he stored many treasures, kept stables, and a full garrison. They represent luxury items, probably from the court of a Canaanite ruler. The ivory plaque at the center is exquisitely carved, rather like a scrimshaw, and shows such a ruler. At the left, on a throne supported by a winged sphinx, sits the king. Both wine and music are being presented for his diversion. Behind him, on the little rounded part of the plaque, servants bring more drinking cups, animal-headed vessels, here inverted on their rims. At the right, the king appears again, this time in a chariot, driving before him two bound prisoners. The scene is a sophisticated amalgam of native and foreign elements, including Egyptian and Syrian. 6 tiny objects, less immediately prepossessing, but fascinating in their implications. At the far left is a small fragment of pottery. The last line in the inscription, which is actually a letter, refers to the house of God. That's the oldest known reference to the original Hebrew temple in Jerusalem, and it comes from the late 7th or very early 6th century BC, just a few decades before the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. Small, yet enormously significant. The other objects are ring seals, suitable to stamp clay or wax sealings on documents. What's most interesting about them, however, is that each bears a name from the Bible. The richly ornamented gray opal, for instance, mentions the name Jezebel in archaic Hebrew script. 587 BC is a chronological watershed in Jewish history. Solomon the Great's temple, the house of God, which had existed for 400 years, was totally destroyed by the Babylonians. The Jewish population of Judah was exiled to Babylonia and forced to live there until the Persian king Cyrus, about 50 years later, allowed them to return to Israel. From then until the establishment of the State of Israel in 1947, the Holy Land remained dominated by one great power after another, and that domination is manifest in the art of the region.